It started on a Tuesday, just another ordinary day in my new house on Oak Street. The place was classic suburbia, white picket fence, sprawling backyard, the works. I was settling in, unpacking the last boxes, when curiosity got the better of me. In the attic, I found a dusty box left by the previous owner. Inside, among forgotten junk, was a single strange blacklight bulb. I took it downstairs, thinking it was just a quirky relic. As dusk fell, I decided to try it out, not knowing what I'd find. That bulb wasn't just a novelty. It was a key to secrets hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right light to reveal them. I was about to illuminate more than just a room. Night settled in as I swapped the regular bulb for the black light. The room transformed. Familiar shapes glowed and shadows deepened. It was fun at first, watching my t-shirt and carpet specks light up. But then, on the wall by the fireplace, a dark, spidery stain appeared, visible only under the purple glow. I switched the light off. Nothing. There it was again. My heart pounded. Was it old paint, a spill? I stepped closer. The stain was larger, more chaotic than I thought. It looked organic, like a memory burned into the wall. The house felt suddenly colder, the silence heavier. This wasn't a game anymore. Something was very wrong. I couldn't look away from the stain. It was a splatter radiating from a central point. Not a spill, but a mark of violence. I tried to rationalize wine, coffee, cleaning, chemicals, anything but what it looked like, but the pattern was too deliberate, too familiar from crime shows. My safe, quiet house now felt like a witness to something horrific. A name surfaced, the Miller case, a woman who vanished from this neighborhood. Was it just coincidence? The thought rooted itself, chilling me to the core. In the room, as these cozy corners became ominous, and the house felt less like a home, more like a tomb. I'd uncovered one secret. How many more were there? Fear battled curiosity, but I couldn't stop. Black light in hand, I searched the house, each room a potential crime scene. In the living room, a long, dark smear appeared on the floor, as if something had been dragged. In the dining room, a fine mist of dark specks dotted the wall, invisible in normal light. Each stain was a landmark, mapping out a hidden history. My home was no longer a blank canvas, it was a record of pain. The splatter, the drag mark, the mist, they told a silent story. Only the blacklight could reveal it. I was uncovering a narrative time had tried to erase, and I was only at the beginning. The hallway was next, a simple corridor, now transformed by fear. At first nothing, relief washed over me. Then, near the closet door, a cluster of dark fingerprints appeared, low to the ground. They looked desperate, as if someone had tried to hold on or escape. I crouched, staring at the ghostly marks, my mind racing. Whose hands had left them? What happened here? The house felt alive, watching, waiting. My charming home was gone, replaced by a mausoleum of secrets. The Miller case haunted me. Were these her final marks? The evidence was undeniable. I was no longer just a homeowner. I was an unwilling witness to a violent past. I moved toward the kitchen at the end of the hall. The kitchen was supposed to be the heart of the home. I pushed open the door and swept the black light across the room. And then I saw it. Under the island was another stain, a large concentrated puddle. It was the kind of stain left by something that had bled for a long time. This was the place where something had ended. The entire surface was covered in faint, dark scratches, deep, frantic scratches that crisscrossed the wood. The kind of marks that could only be made by something sharp. The house was a narrative of violence, and it all culminated here, in the cold, clean kitchen. And the most terrifying part was that I hadn't even checked the whole house yet. The bedrooms were still waiting. The next morning, the sun streamed through the windows. The house looked normal, but I knew what lurked beneath the surface. The splatter, the drag mark, the fingerprints were burned into my memory. My terror turned to a need for answers. I had to understand the story. The Miller case felt like the only place to start. I opened my laptop and typed Sarah Miller disappearance into the search bar. The results flooded the screen. Sarah Miller, a school teacher who had vanished 8 years ago. Sarah Miller had lived on Oak Street. It was my house. I was living in the very house from which Sarah Miller had disappeared. I spent the day consumed by Sarah Miller's digital ghost, reading every article and theory. The police report stated the house was clean, but that contradicted the horror map I'd uncovered with the Blacklight. How could they miss it? The Blacklight wasn't just old, it was the key, a loose thread in a web of deception. Detective Henderson, now retired, felt the house was too clean. He didn't have the Blacklight, now I did. This was a cold case, a real life extinguished. The Blacklight had shown me the ghost of a crime. I was now the sole keeper of its darkest secret. The deeper I dug, the more I realized Sarah Miller might not have been the only one. My research expanded. I stopped looking for her name and started looking for my address. I searched old newspaper archives, public records, and property deeds, tracing the history of the house on Oak Street back through the decades. What I found was a disturbing pattern, a string of unfortunate events, tragedies, and disappearances, all linked to this one unassuming property. It was as if the house itself was cursed, a magnet for darkness that had been operating long before Sarah Miller ever walked through its doors. 30 years ago, long before Sarah's disappearance, there was another incident. A man named Frank Peterson. He was a traveling Choning salesman who had been renting the house. According to a small, buried news brief from 1994, he left for a business trip and never came back. His car was found abandoned in a different state a month later, but Frank himself was never seen or heard from again. The police suspected he had simply run off to start a new life, leaving his old one behind. The case was closed quickly. It was just another person who had vanished. Another loose end, another story without an ending tied to my address. Then, going back even further, to the late 1970s, there was a police report I managed to find in a digitized city archive. It detailed a violent domestic dispute at the house. A woman had called the police, claiming her husband had attacked her. When the officers arrived, the house was in disarray, but the husband was calm, and the wife recanted her story, blaming her injuries on a fall down the stairs. The report noted her hesitation, the fear in her eyes, but with no cooperating witness, they had to leave. No charges were ever filed. I couldn't help but wonder which wall had borne witness to that particular night of terror. The house had a history, a long, dark, violent history. Each event was isolated, separated by years, even decades. On their own, they were just unfortunate, random tragedies. A missing salesman, a domestic dispute, a vanished teacher, but when viewed together, connected by the single common thread of this address, they formed a chilling timeline. The house wasn't just a witness, it was a constant. It was a stage upon which multiple terrible plays had been performed. The Blacklight didn't just show the remnants of one crime, it was showing me the accumulated residue of generations of pain. A new colder fear crept in. The house itself felt saturated with malevolence. The previous owner who left the Blacklight, was he a victim, a witness, or something else? The meticulous cleanup suggested someone who knew what they were doing. Was there a sinister figure using this home as their hunting ground? My home wasn't a sanctuary, but a trap. The comfortable living room felt like a stage set, a facade to lure you in. The white picket fence wasn't the American dream, it was the bars of a cage. I was trapped, not just by the lease, but by the terrible knowledge I now possessed. I had to see it through, check the rest of the house, and know the full story. My grim investigation had to continue. The sun began to set. It was a countdown. This wasn't a series of random tragedies. This was a pattern, a hunting ground, the work of a predator who was patient and meticulous, someone who knew its secrets. A predator like that would need a system. The cleanups were the key. Too perfect, too methodical. This suggested a level of sophistication far beyond that of a common criminal. It was calculated, it was intelligent. Who could have such intimate access to a single property over such a long period of time? It had to be someone who could come and go without suspicion, someone who blended into the fabric of the quiet neighborhood. The pattern wasn't just in the violence, it was in the silence that followed. The predator knew how to create ambiguity. They manipulated the narrative itself, and now I was living in their den. My thoughts kept circling back to Mr. Abernathy, the quiet old man who left me the key to this nightmare. He had lived here for over 40 years. He was here when the woman called the police and when Sarah Miller vanished. He had been a witness to the entire horrifying timeline. Why leave the Blacklight? Was it a mistake or a confession? Or perhaps he wasn't a witness at all. Perhaps he was the artist, the one who painted the invisible horrors on these walls. Now I saw that memory through a new, terrifying filter. The Blacklight bulb felt more like a trophy, a final arrogant game. Here is what I did, the bulb seemed to say. Find it if you can. The sun had disappeared. The house was dark, save for the single lamp. My own home had become a haunted house, and my own imagination was the ghost. I was starting to lose my grip on reality. The paranoia was a slow-acting poison. He sold the house, but was he watching? I peered through the blinds at the dark street. Every shadow seemed like a threat. The quiet street now looked like a stage for a horror movie. I could not shake the feeling of being watched. This sense of being observed was terrifying. The feeling of menace was immediate. I thought about calling the police. They would think I was crazy. I was on my own. There was only one place left to look, the final frontier of my grim exploration, the bedrooms, and specifically my bedroom. The one room in the house that was supposed to be a true sanctuary, a place of rest and peace. I had put off this part of the search, telling myself I was being thorough elsewhere. But honestly, I knew the real reason. I was scared, terrified of what I might find in the most personal space of all. If the public areas of the house held such horrors, what secrets would be kept in the place where people are at their most vulnerable? The thought of sleeping in a room marked by violence was almost too much to bear. With trembling hands, I picked up the lamp. The blacklight bulb safely inside felt heavier than ever before. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing unnaturally in the silence. The phantom fingerprints on the closet door seemed to glow with anticipation as I passed. I reached my bedroom door and paused, my hand hovering over the cold brass knob. For a moment I considered turning back. I could just stop. I could pack a bag, sleep in a hotel, and put the house on the market tomorrow. I could pretend none of this ever happened. I could choose ignorance. But I knew I couldn't. The story was incomplete. Sarah Miller, Frank Peterson, their ghosts wouldn't let me. I had come this far. I had to know the truth, the whole truth. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was dark, the moonlight casting long, skeletal shadows through the window. It looked just as I had left it that morning. My bed was neatly made, my clothes were put away. It was a picture of calm normalcy, a lie, a beautiful, tempting lie. I stepped into the room and closed the door behind me, sealing myself inside with whatever secrets it held. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. My hand shook as I raised the lamp. The purple light poised to paint the walls and reveal the final, terrifying chapter of the house on Oak Street. I braced myself, unsure of what I would find, but knowing with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that whatever it was, it would change everything. The final act of my investigation was about to begin, and I had a sickening feeling that the darkest secret was yet to be revealed. I stood frozen in the doorway of my bedroom, blacklight in hand. This room was my last bastion of peace, where I was supposed to be safe. Now I was about to violate that sanctuary, to invite the house's violent past into my most intimate space. With a trembling hand, I swept the beam of purple light across the room. The first pass revealed nothing. For a moment I allowed myself to hope this room was clean. I was a detective against my will, forced to search for clues I never wanted to find. But I knew this grim tour was not over. The feeling of being watched intensified. It was a cold, prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I was just another temporary occupant, a guest in a house that belonged to its secrets. The room was no longer mine. My movements were slow, deliberate, as if I were exploring a sacred tomb. I swept the blacklight across the floorboards toward my bed. The rug was clean, no drag marks, no stains. Maybe I was wrong. My gaze drifted upward, and there it was. Dark vertical drips ran down the side of the box spring, concealed by the gap between it and the bed frame. The stains were old, but the blacklight made them clear. The illusion of my bedroom as a safe haven was obliterated. The horror was in my bed. The violation was absolute. The house's darkest secret had been sharing my bed with me. A wave of nausea hit me, the lamp shaking in my hand. The drip marks told the story of a body on the mattress. Sarah Miller. The stains suggested she hadn't vanished. Her last moments may have been spent in this bed, now mine. The cleanup Why leave evidence in the mattress unless they replaced the original mattress? The realization hit me hard. The bed came with the house. Mr. Abernathy insisted I keep it. His generosity now felt like a monstrous act. He had sold me the evidence, the tombstone itself. I was an unwitting participant in a cover-up. A final whisper, waiting years for the purple light to give it a voice. Mr. Abernathy's twisted joke was on me. I stumbled backward, away from the bed, my mind reeling in a vortex of horror and disgust. My back hit the dresser and I knocked something off. A small thud on the floor. I didn't care. All I could do was stare at the bed. This Trojan horse of terror that had been the centerpiece of my life. I felt contaminated, as if the house's sickness had seeped into my very bones. The bed was a lie, the whole house was a lie, and I had been living inside it, blissfully unaware. The final piece of the puzzle was in place. The story was complete. Or so I thought. My eyes, still wide with terror, scanned the bed one last time. The comforter, the sheets, the pillows, my pillows, the ones I laid my head on every night, they were safe. They were mine. But as the shaking beam of the blacklight danced across the surface of the bed, it caught something on the pillow closest to the edge. It was small. It was faint. It was almost invisible, even under the purple glow. Oh, a single dark mark, no bigger than a fingertip, marring the clean white pillowcase. I leaned in closer, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break through. The mark was not old. It was not faded like the others. The stains on the walls, the floors, the box spring, they were ghosts of the past. This was not. This stain was fresh. It was sharp, clear, and recent. It hadn't been there last night. I knew it. I would have seen it when I made the bed this morning. My blood ran cold, a glacial freeze that started in my chest and spread through my entire body. This stain was new. This stain was from last night. Panic, pure and absolute, seized me. This wasn't about the past anymore. This wasn't about Sarah Miller or Frank Peterson. This wasn't about the ghost of Mr. Abernathy and his twisted games. This was about now. The predator's pattern wasn't over. The history of violence wasn't finished. The lust stain I found wasn't a relic from a cold case. It was a message, a warning. It meant that someone had been in my room while I slept. Someone had stood over me, close enough to leave a mark on my pillow. The monster wasn't a ghost. The monster was real, and he was still here. The fresh stain on my pillow shattered what little sanity I had left. The monster wasn't just a memory. The hunt wasn't over, and I had become the prey. I fled the house, dropping the black light as I ran. I ended up at an all-night diner and called the police. To my surprise, they listened, and detectives went to the house. I told them everything. The police forensics team, using my blacklight, confirmed every stain I had found. The fresh stain on my pillow was analyzed, but the results were inconclusive. Mr. Abernathy had passed away, taking his secrets with him. The case remains officially open, but I know the truth. I never went back. The house was eventually sold again. I often wonder about the new owners. I live in a new apartment in a new city, but I can't escape the shadows. I find myself searching for strange black light bulbs in online stores. I am haunted not by ghosts, but by the knowledge of what can be hidden in plain sight. What stories they would tell, if only viewed under the right kind of light. That single dark stain on my pillow remains the most terrifying mystery of all. It reminds me that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed again. The darkness, once you've seen it, is everywhere. Now I am a witness, or what might have been left on your pillow while you slept.